Thank you for staying with us. Just recently, world leaders gathered in Brazil for COP30, the 2025 UN Climate Summit. Over 2 weeks, intense negotiations happened. Negotiators grappled with the planet's most urgent challenge, climate change. The summit concluded with a deal that calls for increased funding to help developing countries adapt to climate impacts. But for Africa, which contributes only a small fraction of global emissions, yet suffers disproportionately from climate disasters, the real question is, will the money promised equally arrive, and will it be enough? Across the Sahel, the Horn, Southern Africa, and the coasts, droughts, floods, erratic rains, desertification are no longer future warnings, they are daily realities. The estimates are stark. Scientists and economists warn that adaptation needs for Africa alone could run into tens of billions annually over the coming decades. What must African negotiators and the governments do post-COP30 to secure, manage, and turn climate funding into real resilience for communities? That is our focus on the second half of One Slot. And for this conversation, we have a familiar face in the environmental sector, Desmond Majekodunmi. He is a climate change expert. We also have Gloria Gowal-Abiri, adaptation, jobs, and entrepreneurship specialist. Thank you very much, Desmond and Gloria, for being here. I will start with you, Desmond, to just establish the basis for this conversation. What does climate adaptation mean, and how urgent is it for African countries today?
Climate adaptation means that we need to prepare ourselves for the onslaught of the negative impact of what we have done to nature. In practical terms, let's look at Lagos, for instance. We're going to have more ocean surges. We're going to have higher sea levels, and we're going to have bigger storms. So we need to prepare ourselves in Lagos, which is a very low-lying location. We need to build these massive stone walls in front of the sea to protect the sea from coming into the coast, which is had already done over the years. So we need to do a lot more of that protection. We need to ensure that we have effective drainage systems, far more effective than what they've been in the past, because there's going to be a lot more rain. In fact, it's classified now as rain bombs as opposed to just rainstorms because of the extra heat. And it's pretty simple science. You know, when you add heat to water, you get more evaporation. So if you get more evaporation from the massive water bodies that we have off our coast and inland and so on, you're going to get heavier rain. And this is exactly what's happening because we've heated Earth. We've heated it up over 1.5 degrees, just up to 1.5 degrees centigrade above its former average temperature. So we need to adapt and get ready for the onslaught because it's an ongoing activity. And if we allow it to continue too long, the consequences would even be beyond our capacity to adapt. This is how serious it is, to answer your last question. Yeah, that's how serious it is. Well,
yeah, I mean, the pictures on the screen, the pictures on the screen tells the story on its own. We see that on a daily basis, a small rain, and everywhere is overwhelmed. Gloria, aside Lagos and other major cities in Nigeria, which other African region or countries are most vulnerable, and why, in your view, must adaptation funding be seen as a life-saving priority and not a luxury?
Yeah, thank you. Just as Edward has said, we have other parts of Africa, especially the Sahel and the Horns of Africa, like you rightly mentioned at the start of the show. So countries like Niger, Somalia, Mali, Djibouti, and all of this is because they face very compounding conflicts, and climate risk hence affects them more, and because they also have weak governance systems, so these affect their livelihoods, and this is why climate adaptation is urgent, and funding needs to be channeled there. And for these countries, and even Nigeria inclusive, to adapt to these effects of climate change, we've seen that there are a lot of barriers that are really contributing to the slow adaptation when it comes to accessing climate finance, because of the rigorous processes in application to these financing. So this is why you see that adapters are calling for very simpler processes to enable these weak countries, weak governance within countries to be able to access these funds. We also not forgetting the small island states like the likes of Mauritius and all that countries. So you can see that climate change is vastly affecting all countries within Africa.
Yeah, we do have an idea and the challenge before us. So I guess we should shift the conversation just a tad bit and talk about adaptation in action. Desmond, is there examples of adaptation in action or some projects or initiatives that have worked in any part of the continent, be it Nigeria or other places that are suffering most of the crisis?
Yes, there is one particular adaptation project that has been going on for a while, and this is called the Green Wall of the Sahara Desert, which is being done in conjunction with several other African countries, including Nigeria. And, large budgets have been made available for this. And in some countries, some of the countries, it's been quite effective. It's not an easy thing to grow trees in an arid region like the desert, but it can be done if the money is deployed effectively and honestly. Unfortunately, the segment of the Green Wall in Nigeria, to put it politely, it could be a lot better. So that's one particular project that some of the other African countries have picked up on pretty well. Lagos has done some good adaptation for its coastal area, but this needs to be extended massively. The challenge is, it's a bit of an inconvenient truth. And the challenge is to get the reality of what we're facing into the consciousness of humanity and the leadership. The Secretary General of the United Nations in 2015, he called it a crisis, and they were trying to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions that were coming mainly from burning fossil fuel, but also destroying the forest. He called it a crisis in 2015. We ratified a treaty to agree to reduce it. By 2024, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere had never, ever been so high in recorded history, and we also recorded the hottest year on the back of 2023. So he faced the COP conference, because they have this every year, in 2024. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, it's no longer a crisis. And everybody was like, eh? He now shouted out. He said, it's an emergency. Because you see, we're pushing the various incredible, miraculous systems of this beautiful earth with our atmosphere and our waterways and so on. We're pushing them to a point where they will start collapsing. It's an emergency, and we're not taking it as if it's an emergency at all. It's like you're having a party, you're having a groovy time in your house, in the basement, you're all enjoying yourself, boogie, 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 and somebody tells you there's smoke coming from the roof, and you're telling them, please, no, we're enjoying ourselves, and your house is on fire. So yeah, we need to really take it seriously and adapt, and mitigate.
Desmond, I would love to believe that the world sees the urgency to address climate change. And I would want to come to you with a question a little bit away from the conversation, but the posturing of foreign strong weight countries about climate change being a fraud. While you think about that, let me come to Gloria and just talk a bit about funding. The African Group of Negotiators has been calling for a scale-up in adaptation finance. Can you tell us a bit about the current level of support and how big the gap is?
Thanks. So the current level of support seems to be quite minimal in terms of capacity building and project readiness. So I'll just shift a bit to mitigation. We see that there's some sort of funding targeted towards mitigation, and this is because in mitigation you're able to prove the profitability of a business in that sense, and so investors are likely to invest there, and donors are also able to see the ROI immediately. But in terms of adaptation, this adaptation projects could be majorly impact focused, where you see livelihoods being improved and resilience being built within communities. So it's difficult to build the bankability of those projects because there's also lack of data within the ecosystem in terms of climate risk assessments. So these are some of the challenges that exist with accessing funds. And we've seen that the gap is very huge. Recently, UNEP has shown a scale of the gap, saying that we need about 32 billion we need about 310 billion per year for adaptation by 2030. And currently, we are seeing about 25 billion, and that's also reduced from funds that came in for adaptation from the previous year. So we need to gain more funds, especially also from the private sector, not just only at country levels. And to do this, a lot of capacity needs to be built to ensure that there are adaptation projects in the pipelines that these funders can fund. And in doing that, you can also relate adaptation projects to country development projects, but to ensure that there's a climate lens and climate risk assessment done in development projects. For example, the road that is being built in Lagos, the Calabar-Lagos road, is there anyone looking at the climate lens? Are we building, especially since the road is also close to the coastal lines, have we looked at how we can possibly build reefs to ensure that the ocean is not coming into the road, and just someone who's looking at the climate lens to ensure that these development projects can also return adaptation benefits.
All right, Desmond, your 2 cents on world leaders, posturing, their comments, some of them, not all of them, about the climate change situation and how that is impacting funding and proper adaptation.
Yes, it's so typical of our inadequacies, as human beings. As Gloria so eloquently enlightened us, the gap between the amount of funding that's required and the amount of funding that's been made available, it's a huge gap. And it just highlights a very, very pertinent issue about humanity in general. These leaders in the foreign countries that are saying things, blowing trumpets about climate change is a hoax. That is, you're calling the 90% of climatologists, geologists, space scientists, and groups of other people, you're calling them liars, because there's over a 90% consensus that climate change is not only very real, but it's accelerating at a geometric progression. That is, we're creating situations whereby nature herself, with dieback of ice caps, which used to reflect heat. Now there's less ice to reflect the heat. So there's more heat and there's more melting of the ice caps and forest diebacks and so on, So nature herself is on the brink of actually, creating far more of this global warming issue than what we human beings have done, even though we triggered it off. So for them to be in denial, well, it's just a symptom of the fundamental problem that humanity has to overcome. And that is, we have to have a massive transformation of ourselves. We have to have a genuine renewal of our minds into far more caring, compassionate, loving people, in order that we shall stop this greed-driven, pride-driven, just this desire to just accumulate more. We got to get over that, because nature has not taken it. She tolerated us for a long time, and she's not taking it anymore. In fact, I'm going to ask you a question, my dear. Can you plant cassava and harvest cocoyam?
Definitely not. That is not possible at all. I needed you to speak to that, because we still have people today who are expressing skepticism about the reality of climate change. So no matter how intense the conversation is, that has to come in, so we drum it home. Gloria, COP30 has come and gone, and as usual, we have agreements. As much as there is still skepticism as to the strength of these summits that we hold every year, and then we discuss, observers say this year's agreement falls short of expectation, that it remains vague about key issues, especially something to do with fossil fuel phase out. Does that ambiguity put Africa's adaptation needs at risk?
Yeah, so rightly so. The ambiguity with this happened because also a lot of countries did not submit their NDCs and NAPs on time, as their national adaptation plans on time. And we've seen that those have started to come in. So this weakens the global emission trajectories because in weakening that, then the adaptation needs in the long run increases. But the direct risk to the short-term adaptation funding is more political. So if rich countries fail to commit real adaptation finance or prioritize mitigation instruments only, then adaptation pipelines will be starved. So it's best that countries start to put together their plans early enough before these summits are held. And in putting together those plans, we need to also see how the indicators, how they're measuring the outcomes that they have possibly implemented before this summit. So something good that came out of that was also the pledge to the just transition mechanism after COP30. So this now focuses on, I think Desmond was talking about passion, love for people. So the just transition gives us the hope to say that people are being put first in this transition away from fossil fuel. So you can expect to see that. An example would be that if you are moving from coal, for example, the workers in coal, how are you preparing them for the next level, which is what jobs do they go to? So do you start to see like capacity building, upskilling these people to gain new skills, which now turns into adaptation jobs or possible adaptation entrepreneurship, so that livelihoods and resilience within communities can still be protected.
All right, we need to wind down now. So Desmond, African leaders often say, I'll just stay with finance. African leaders often say it's not just a problem of low funding, but how hard it is to access what's available. Why do you think many African countries struggle to access international climate funds, even when they qualify? If you could do that in about 60 seconds, that would be great.
Yeah, very good question, and it's a huge challenge. Partly, there's quite a bit of mistrust because, unfortunately, there's no doubt that a lot of the monies that have come through earlier have been misappropriated. There's no doubt about that. But also, there's this lack of compassion. It's just an expression of the negativity of the character of the leaders. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they just want to hold on to it all. But they got to wake up to the new realities now. And nature is telling humanity, okay, you got to change your ways. Otherwise, I'm going to change you. And I'm seeing some very good signs of this coming, especially out of the young people like our dear lady Gloria there, but even younger people who are determined to ensure that we have a very, very good environment and we put people ahead of profit.
All right. Thank you very much, Gloria and Desmond, for speaking with us on this subject. Thank you indeed.